righty, so good to see you here today. We're going to have probably an abbreviated lesson today, and don't forget, starting next week, Brother Tony will be teaching through what happens after the rapture of the. You said after the church? Is that what you said?
Yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit about the rapture itself, and then about what happens to the church after it.
What happens to the church after? So it's going to be a neat opportunity to do that. So today is, since we finished up with our disciples, just like last week, just kind of a one-off there. Take your Bibles to John 15, verse number 5. John 15. And there's so much to this verse here. I'm going to barely scratch the surface today. I'm just going to share 3 simple thoughts with you. Jesus is speaking here in John 15:5, and he tells us an awful lot in this one verse right here. He says, I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit, for without me ye can do nothing. And so as I was praying about this and developing these thoughts here, I was thinking sometimes as we get older, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, that sometimes we feel like we're not as important as we used to be, in life, and whatever the case may be. Maybe if we're coming out of a business or coming out of a career that we held some level of authority or importance, we just felt like we were contributing more to families, contributing more to society, contributing more to the church. And maybe you were able to serve more in the days gone by as a Sunday school teacher, or as a whatever, bus captain or whatever. And now you're like, what do I have to offer? I kind of show up. I think sometimes we can feel like, okay, I'm just a sponge. I just come, soak up, but I'm not really able to do anything. And there's always challenges to that, right? I don't think, again, I told you a couple weeks ago, until he's through with us, or God's through with us, we're going to still be hanging around here on this dirt ball called earth, right? And that means he has something for us to do. That means he has a plan for us. He has. The contrast there is sometimes we try to do so much on our own strengths and our own abilities and our own power that sometimes we leave off enlisting the help of the power of God in our lives. We get used to doing things. We get accustomed to it. We're just going to power through, right? And so our lives, I think, many times are spent primarily living and making choices that don't seem to, we do a lot of things, but we don't want to bother God with asking him wisdom or discernment on that. And I think on average, that's, how many times a day on average, I guess some days are worse or better than others, do we consult through prayer the direction and the power of the Holy Spirit for our lives for that day? We just kind of get up and we know we have to do today. We know what's on our agenda. We got that appointment. We've got this. We got that. But do we say, okay, Lord, help me here. How am I going to get through this? Give me some wisdom right there. So, yeah, the big ones, I think the major issues, we go to him, we ask prayer on. But what about the smallest ones? What about the ones that seemingly are insignificant, those kind of decisions? According to this verse right here, if you look at it, we can do the smaller ones, not just the big ones without God, right? Is that what it says? We can do the little things without God, but we need him for the bigger things. No, right? He says, for without me ye can do nothing. Nada, zero, zilch, right? There's no, the phrase without me denotes or is the same as separate from me. You guys have done enough gardening in your life, or messed with flowers or pruning branches or trees or what have you, and when a branch is separated from the trunk of the tree or from the stalk of the plant, that it immediately begins to what? Wither and die. This is amazing how that works. I mean, you pull that thing off, or you snip that thing off, it's not going to be long before that branch is going to wither. No nutrients can flow through the plant molecules, right? No chlorophyll cells can be filled or produced. There's no way that the glucose and the water coming up from the ground kind of gets to that, and the branch is going to die, right? Now, when you go to Kroger or you go to Publix or you go to a florist, what do they give you with that little bunch of flowers oftentimes? Pack of what? What is it? Plant food. I think sometimes it's sugar water. Really? You know, just a little thing. And that will help. That'll help sometimes maintain a little bit of vibrance, you know, right, in the flowers or whatever. You dump that in the vase or what have you. But we all know how the story goes. Eventually that bouquet is going to die, right? That little clump of flower, it's going to shrivel up, and you're either going to, you know, put it in a magazine or put it in an encyclopedia. Y'all, you ever do that? Put encyclopedia and press them and things along those lines? It's eventually going to die, right? And here's what's going on. God, what are you laughing at, brother?
Nobody has an encyclopedia anymore.
I know, right? If you do, it has flowers pressed in it, I can assure you. Yeah, a Bible, yeah. So the idea here is this. God can do without man, but man cannot do without God. Now we'll make 3 quick statements and simple observations here about this verse and we'll be done. Let's read the verse again. I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. For without me ye can do nothing. So here's the first thought. We can't get it backwards. I know it's a simple statement. We can't get this verse flip-flopped, right? Here's what I'm saying. I think way too often, without really knowing or trying, we think everything kind of stems from us. Our calendar, pocketbook, all reflects that many times. He says, I am the vine, ye are the branches. In other words, I think sometimes we make ourselves the vine. And if you're a mama, especially, or a grandmama, it's sometimes harder to think that. I was talking with someone the other day, and their wife is going through some issues, and he made the comment of, I don't know what I would do without her. I mean, he's like, I don't know how to do the inside stuff. You know, and I'm like, I understand that. They're kind of like oftentimes the glue that kind of holds, oftentimes kind of the family together a little bit, right? Everything kind of stems from that right there. And a lot of times that's how we live our lives. Because everything about us sometimes, our kids, our grandkids, our jobs, our hobbies, our friends, our church, inadvertently we see ourselves as the very thing that everything else produces from. And that's why I say we can't get it backwards. We got to come to the everyday knowledge that He's the vine, and we and everything else that we are touching, it stems from Him, not the other way around. And I think if we would really think through that more, it would probably help us in our own mindset. It would sometimes take some of the pressure off of us as well. That, you know, everything doesn't stem from you or me. It stems from Him. We're just offshoots, right? Now, the way we can kind of look at it is He's the vine. We're the branches off that vine, but on every branch there's usually a few little stems, right? And that's how we need to look at our family. Those little stems and our careers and hobbies, all these little things that are maybe on our branch, but all of them will die like we will, separate from Him. You know what I'm saying? Or we'll wither up. So when we keep it straight, that we can kind of breathe easy. You know, realizing that He has the power, He has the authority to give us and everything else that we touch the power that we need to continue to do life, right? And it's when I remember that it's not my job to make sure everything else in my life stems from me, but that those people, those things are just a stem like us. He's the vine, we're the branches. And so we have to have conscientious effort not to separate that and get it backwards. We can't get it backwards. Here's a second thought. With God, there's only great increase. There's only great increase with God. Look what it says. He that abideth me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth what? Much fruit. In other words, when I'm where I need to be, abiding in Him like I should, the only product coming from my life is much fruit. Isn't that what He says? He that abideth in me, when I'm where I ought to be with him, we know that he's in us if we're saved. That is going to produce much fruit. It doesn't read, bringeth forth fruit, does it? It doesn't say, he and me, abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth fruit. No. It says it bringeth forth much fruit. So here's the deal. Anything and everything I do when I'm where I'm supposed to be, abiding in God, only brings much fruit, not barely any fruit. And people say, well, preacher, I don't know. I don't see that. I mean, nothing really great comes out of my life anymore. I mean, I'm kind of like a spoke on the wheel right there. I'm just kind of going around, and nothing really. And so let me ask you a question: by whose account? You're making that determination. I make that determination. I don't really do much. So who is the fruit inspector? He is, right? Producing fruit. He's the fruit inspector, right? What are you laughing at?
You said fruit inspector. I just thought that was humorous.
Okay, I thought you could give me some insight right there. The preacher's not the fruit inspector, right? Your children, they may think they are, right? They're not the fruit inspectors. Your co-workers, nada. Your spouse. So if Jesus, the Son of the living God, tells me here in verse number 5 that as long as I'm abiding in him and he in me, anything that comes up in my life is much fruit, then for crying out loud, it's much fruit, right? He's the one stamping it, right? Good, much. It may not appear that way to you and I. Oftentimes it's not. Our lives may seem super mundane, super routine. You know, people ask me a lot of times, why don't you write a book? I'm like, about what? Nobody wants to know what am I going to write about? You know what I'm saying? Oh, you can write about this now. I'm like, nobody wants to hear that stuff, right? I mean, that's the mindset that I have. Nobody. And yet I look at other people and I'm like, how in the world did he write a book? You know what I mean? So the product of our service may seem less than superior by somebody else's standard, but the only one, honestly, that has the authority to determine the quality and really the quantity of my fruit is Jesus. And so based on this verse, when I'm in him like I should be, the same bringeth forth much fruit. So don't buy into what anyone tells us. No one sees our fruit production like him. Even your own spouse doesn't see your own fruit production like him. And so with him there is only great increase. That's the point that I'm trying to make there. And here's a third observation. We're not just powerless without him, we're productless. Right? Not just powerless, we're productless. Look at that verse again, the last phrase here, where we broke down this verse in 3 things. I am the vine, ye are the branches. You can't get it backwards. Can't get it messed up. He that abideth in me and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. That's the point I was trying to make just now. And here it is. For without me ye can do nothing. And the last phrase of this verse cannot be overstated. It's simply the bottom line truth. For without me, you can do nothing. But I don't really think we believe it because we don't act like it. Right? Without him giving us the breath in our lungs and the sanity in our minds, I was, I'm not going to share that. Our minds began to waver and go, and sometimes much earlier than others. And boy, you've been around people maybe related with that are going through, dementia, Alzheimer's. It's horrific. It's a sad state of affairs. And you wonder, how can someone who is so sharp not process now the most simplest of things, right? Without Jesus giving us those abilities, then that's us. But I want you to notice something here, and as I wrap this up here. He tells us in that last phrase, without me you can do nothing. This is super important, y'all, okay? I know this is simple stuff this morning, but I want you to grasp it. He says without him we can what? He doesn't say we are nothing. And that to me is a beautiful reminder. He loves us more than we can possibly imagine. And based on this verse, we are absolutely important to him. He doesn't say you are not. He says you can't do anything. Even in those times we're not abiding with him like we ought to, because we go through seasons where we're kind of doing our own thing, marching to the beat of our own drum, and we're not really confiding in him like we ought to, and we're just making decisions, and hey, I've been there, I've done that more times than I'd like to admit. And you get in a habit, you get in a routine, this is what we're going to do. And then when we go through the seasons, we're not with him like we ought to. He doesn't degrade us, though, and tells us, you are nothing. He just says, at that moment, you can't do anything. Not with anything of significance. And there is a significant difference right there. Too many Christians are walking around feeling as if we're nothing in the sight of God. And that's so not true. We are every bit as important as the next person in his sight. And the devil wants us to listen to that lie. I've counseled many people that have come to this point where they just listen to the lie of the devil, and they get such a self-pittiness that I'm nothing. I'm just here. I'm just a waste of people's time, and why are y'all worrying about me, and all this kind of stuff. Now to the devil, we're nothing. He'd just soon kill us if he could, right? I mean, he'd like to destroy us, destroy our reputation, our testimony, cause us to wreak havoc in our families, and wreck the churches that we're involved in. To the devil, that's right. But to Jesus, his love for us knows no limits, right? Ephesians 2:4, but God, who is rich in mercy, for his great love, it says, wherewith he hath loved us. It's not just a simple love. John 15, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Simple reminder this morning that he does love us and that we're important to him, but also the fact that when we look at John 15:5, we have to get to that point where we understand we can't get it backwards. He's the vine, we're the branches. We have to understand and realize that there is only great increase with God, much fruit, in the fact that without him, we are not only powerless, we're also productless. We're not going to produce what he has for us. But it doesn't say we are nothing. He says we can do nothing. Yes, ma'am.
Verse that says, he knows our frame.
Right.
I love that.
Isn't that something?
I go to that so many because, okay, he knows everything about us, what we're able to do, what we're not. It's been a lot.
I like the verse that says, who art man that thou art mindful of him?
Right.
Who art man that thou art mindful? It's like, God, why are you even messing with us? And we're talking how many billions, right? 6 or 7, I think, billion in the world right now. He knows his person. That goes back to the attributes of God, right? He's a personal God. And he's also immanent. He's involved in our lives as well as over us. It's a unique dynamic there. Again, if you hadn't taken the attributes of God class offering, that's a good one right there. Any other comments? All right. Yes, ma'am.
Too much. In a condensed what is abide? If you said abide, what does that mean to you?
Abide. Okay. If I abide in him, that to me, and I didn't look at that up in the Greek this morning, or this week, abiding in him, to me, that gives the idea, the mindset that we're walking with him, we're in lockstep with him right now. Obviously, we have to be saved in order to do that, right? But you remember me teaching a couple weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago now, about the power of God in salvation. We talked about there's salvation, which is freedom from the what? Now remember? The penalty of sin, right? Salvation is freedom from the penalty of sin. It means we get saved, we do not have to, the wages of death is sin, we have to die and go to hell. Then I said, But not only is there salvation, which is freedom from the penalty of sin, I said there is sanctification. What was sanctification? Freedom from the power of sin. Because sin still has power over us, still drawing us, right? And then, of course, there was glorification, But that sanctification, that's a part of that abiding to me. We're saved, but you know a lot of saved people. I know a lot of saved people that are not where they ought to be with the Lord. And we've been there ourselves. So to me, it's being where we ought to be with the Lord. It's spending time. It's hanging out, You hear of a humble abode. This is where I live. This is where I hang out. This is where I dwell. We're abiding in Him. That's where we're hanging. That's where we're dwelling. What the Scripture says, and the psalmist says, abiding in the shelter, abiding under the arms of the Almighty. I think that's how it goes. It's almost like a mother hen. Yeah. Well, in John, he says that. And Jesus says, I and my Father are one, and no man can pluck them out of my Father's hand. And I always look at that. I don't think I have a coin in here, but I always explain that to me when I talk about, especially about the once saved, we can't lose our salvation. My mind went blank there. But this is, we're us in a sense. He says, I am my Father's hand. There's no man can pluck them out of my Father's hand. I and my Father are one. It's like Jesus has us, I think, right there. There's no way we're slipping through those cracks. The devil can't pluck us out of that right there. We're saved. We're in this. But then he says, I and my Father are one. It's like, I think that's I've got the Father strapping out now. You might be able to pry that one out of my hand. You try real hard, but it's going to double your efforts if you're trying to get it out of both of those hands, right? And you're definitely not going to drop that. I think that's kind of part of that. Where I need to be. It's abiding under the shadow of the Almighty. I think is what that verse is. I was talking about abiding in the shadow of the Almighty. I remember when I was a kid, years ago, my grandfather had some property over on the access road there in Lithonia, a farm, and he used to have some pretty big gardens. And I was too young to really have to work it. We would pick beans, but it was, We had our row to do, but it wasn't make or break it, We would have to do some shucking of the corn on the porch, but it really wasn't depending upon what I was producing, right? But I remember being out there, and I remember on one end of that field, between actually two fields, there was a big old oak tree, and it was just a kind of a shade tree. Whenever you got to that side of the garden, you were glad because you were abiding under that shadow, right? And in the morning, it would be on one side of the field more. In the afternoon, it would be on the other side, on the other field or whatever, because of the way the sun shifted. And the lower it got, the longer your shadow got, and you would stay in the shadow slower picking than you were in the sun, right? But when it was noon, yeah, straight up, you just had a shadow right there. There wasn't a whole lot of shadow there. The comfort came when we hung up close to the shadow. That's when we'd eat lunch and drink water. We'd stay over there, and we'd have to get close to the tree in order to have the protection of the shadow. And I kind of think about that with us. The closer we are, abiding in the shadow of the Almighty, the closer we are to Him, hey, we're going to be in the shade. We're going to have that protection, right, from the sun. The farther we get away from it, then we're going to be subject to the elements. So I don't know if that helps. That to me, that's the abiding aspect of it. Anybody else want to add to that? You guys are awesome. Y'all are teaching me this morning. Thank you. Y'all, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.